Thomas and Friends has been one of the largest running kids shows starting in 1984. Originally, it used models but transitioned into CGI in 28 and 29. It really came a long way, and I was glad to be one of those people working on it. I work for Hit Entertainment as one of the show writers. I still work for Hit, but no longer work on an actual show. Since Matto has recently brought Hit, they were completely changing the show into something called Thomas and Friends Big World, Big Adventures, which I'm pretty sure it's going to be total failure. The main reason I stopped working on the show was because my favorite two characters, Edward and Henry, got the boot and replaced by two new female characters, which I hated. Material thought it's better this way because the Steam team was unbalanced in terms of gender. Only one female engine and six males. However, I thought this is a horrible idea because Thomas and Friends already had an almost equal audience of male and female viewers, thus rendering the audition of those characters completely pointless besides benefiting to the plot, which is Thomas going on a big adventure around the world with one of the female characters. Instead of working on a show, I created individual shorts with a group of my favorite co-workers, which are most often focused on Edward and Henry rather than Thomas. They are aired on TV and also uploaded on YouTube. Anyways, enough with that. It's time to get to the point of the story. It was March 5th, 2015. The adventures begin. My favorite Thomas and Friends special had just been released on March 3rd. I was proud of myself for helping with it. That day, I was browsing through the bunch of documents about the show when I discovered one called Thomas and the Unfinished Bridge. Restricted. This got me confused. I kept the track all of the Thomas and Friends episode, but I knew that there wasn't one called Thomas and the Unfinished Bridge. I asked my boss about the document. Oh, that? In 1988, an episode was going to be made called Thomas and the Unfinished Bridge, but it's never aired. Why? Well, it was supposed to be a regular episode, although it wasn't part of a season, as the last season before the episode was made in 1986. As you know, the episode was supposed to be having like this. Thomas was doing something normal and his brakes began to fail. He was going towards an unfinished bridge with a bunch of passengers. Inside a coach, he was pulling. Luckily, Edward saw this and managed to stop Thomas by coupling up the coach and applying his brakes. Somebody working at the company who made a drift of an episode and sent it to the show's main creators in VHS tape. I think the guy name was Eric, and then the company noticed some things in the drift. They fired the person who made it and canceled the entire episode. But why? We don't even know, and we don't want you to either. And what happened to the VHS tape? I've been told that the company kept it, but it was stolen by somebody. Nobody knows where it went. This was sort of creepy. I should have ignored this Thomas the Unfinished Bridge thing, but my curiosity even got the better of me, and this was on those occasions. I got home that same day. I searched Amazon for anything called Thomas and the Unfinished Bridge. Surprisingly enough, I actually found an old VHS tape. With the name being sold by an account, which I had a username with a bunch of random characters, letters and numbers specifically. I found this odd. And I thought maybe I should stop there, but my curiosity got the better of me again. I ordered the VHS tape, and it took 8 days for the tape to arrive before it finally did on March 13th. I connected my VCR to my TV and inserted the tape into the player. What was on this tape? into play. What I saw was way too scary, dark, and depressing for kids' show. There was no title screen. Instead, the episodes just started. This was understandable because apparently the tape contained a drift. It started off normally though, with a shot of Thomas chugging through the forest happily, carrying a coach full of passengers behind him. There were no two things. There were two things that were slightly odd, though. First off, there was no narration, even though there was a narration, and specifically in every other episode of the show, like usual. Every single season until the CGI decided to do no narrating in the present future. And the second off, instead of pulling Annie and Clarabelle like he usually do while transporting passengers, he was pulling a faceless coach. The episode then shows Thomas approaching a station, presumably the one where he would drop off the passengers. He tried to apply his brakes and they failed. That's exactly what my boss said that was supposed to happen. The episode then showed Thomas approaching the station of pursuit. The Thomas went straight through the station, unable to stop, as the people on the station give a confused look. The classic runaway theme used in a show during the situation similar to these started playing. Next, there was a shot in front of a Thomas. There was a scared expression on his face. Then a shot from behind Thomas appeared. It showed him passing the sign reading, "Warning, unfinished bridge ahead." The episode was already slightly intense for children, but it didn't seem to be that bad yet. Then there was a shot of a passenger inside of a coach. They were all screaming in terror, and their screams seemed hyper-realistic as well. Then a wide shot showed Thomas passing the sitting where Edward was resting. Edward noticed what was happening and sped onto the track, going towards Thomas. Soon, we got to the coach. However, since it's a coach, there was no one there to couple Edward up to it. This was a serious problem. There was another shot of the inside of the coach, with more hyper-realistic scream. Then there was extremely wide shot showing Thomas getting dangerous close to the unfinished bridge. Then there was a shot of inside Thomas' cabin. His driver says, "The brakes are working again." By far, that was the only speaking line in the entire episode besides the scream. Then it showed Thomas. He was probably supposed to apply his brakes, but he didn't. Instead, he smiles and sped up even faster. Now things were seriously getting messed up. The runaway theme began to lower and pitch, beginning distorted and demonic sounding with screams playing in the background. Thomas began to laugh, and then I watched it with horror. He plunged straight over the side of the bridge with a coach. I saw Edward brakes behind him just before he went over too. Thomas and the coach landed on a bunch of rocks, getting battered before falling into the stream. There was one more shot of the inside of the coach, now half submerged in water. Dead bodies were everywhere. The screen faded into static. In about 10 seconds before the scene then shows of Edward watching in terror as Sir Topham Hatt used to blowtorch and take off Thomas's face, which showed up an expression of pure pain and horror. Tears were running down his cheeks. Then Sir Topham Hatt took off his face, which immediately became lifeless, and threw it into the nearby pool of a molten metal. His face melted away. The face melted away. You deserve this and much more, Topham Hatt said angrily. 10 more seconds of static before the another scene appeared. Edward was in the smelter shed. His driver and fireman were nowhere to be seen. His tender wasn't there either. Without Thomas, I am worthless. I must join him again. I watched as a claw came down and grabbed Edward and pulled him upward and dropped him into the huge pool of molten metal. He melted in the pool on screen. His face melted last, which was horrifying enough, but even worse was that just before his face melted, I could be seen that he had an expression of happiness. Then the episode faded into static for good. I took the VHS tape out of the VCR and snapped it in half. Nobody will ever see this horrifying excuses of the episode again. Later, I noticed that the username of the Amazon account, which showed me the tape, wasn't just a random letters and numbers. It was something encoded in base 64. When encoding scheme and that converted words into random letters and numbers, sometimes other characters. After running the username through the base 64 decoder, it came out a URL for the website. When I visited the website, it was just a couple of sentences written on a blank page, but those sentences scare me. Children needs to know what really happens in the world. I'll make sure it's not hidden from them.